Right, welcome to the channel. This article was published on the 8th of January on Variety, so I'm a little bit late to it. I do apologise. I've just been busy, just been a little bit hectic. But I've got to the article now, and it basically tells me that Picard is going to be a disaster, a bomb. Really, really politically charged, which shouldn't be too much of a surprise because it's got Kurtzman behind it. Kurtzman, the man who famously came out and said he would only do Star Trek Discovery if a black woman was the captain. For some bizarre, strange reason. That was the motivation and the drive behind doing it. Okay. Now, again, like I say, we'll get into it. I'm sorry this is late. The opening to the article is not that important, but there's two key bits in here, which I'm sure we can all universally agree on, regardless of our political leanings, that is not important when we're discussing Star Trek Picard. He stands and paces when a subject such as Brexit or Donald Trump aggravates him. What's this got to do with sci-fi? Now this really does set the stage for the entire article, and basically where they're going with Star Trek Picard, and that's why I say it's going to be a complete shit show. And unfortunately, I also think this tells us this is not going to age very well, because you're pinning too much on very current events, but it's not out yet. So those current events that you're talking about will be very, very dated. People's perception of them will be completely different, maybe, by the time this gets released. And that's bad. That shows us that actually the writers are not forward-thinking enough. Talk about these things which are going on, world events, but don't talk about them in the current here and now, okay? Because if you do that, you've got real problems with the aging of the property. Star Trek The Next Generation and Star Trek age very well because they take issues which are universal, pun intended, I guess, and they just break them down. But they don't hinge too many issues and story points on very key current events. Like, I'm aware Star Trek Discovery even has a Trump-esque figure. These things don't age very well because history and people's perception of those things change. People warm to it, they cold to it. It's not good. And like I say, regardless of your political leanings, we can all pretty much agree on that, right? Cool. So all of this stuff is nonsense. It's really just about who he is. He came from nothing. He's poor and, all this stuff. He's not poor now. It's really kind of redundant, isn't it? And also, as well, I've got to say, I really like Patrick Stewart. But, I don't know. The narrative that's being pushed now currently is basically off-putting. And it's a shame because I really like him as an actor. Now it continues, right? So on January 23rd, CBS All Access will debut Star Trek Picard, a series in which Stewart reprises the thoughtful, cultured, bold starship captain he played for 7 seasons on Star Trek The Next Generation, and in a string of 4 feature films that ended in 2002. The new show is different from its predecessor in nearly every respect. Why would you do that? What? Sorry, what? Why would you do that? You've literally just explained how popular it was. 7 seasons. But it's going to be different in every way. Jasper, mate. Oh, sorry, my dog's dead from how pathetic and ridiculous this news is. He's not dead, he's just on the floor. This is crazy. What the hell? So texture, tone, format, production value, even the likelihood of characters dropping an F-bomb. That's all by design. Stewart's design. Okay. So this is what really, it winds me up about these things, right? Patrick Stewart returning to this role, returning to Picard, is iconic. That is how you're getting people to watch this show, isn't it? Let's be honest, right? That's the only reason you're going to tune in to Picard is for Picard. But now you're changing it all. So why would we go and watch it? I don't understand. Where's the thought process here? Where is the thought process? He is uninterested in repeating himself. says Alex Kurtzman, the show's creator and executive producer. There's things about not repeating yourself, but then there's this, like changing everything. So he says, and the mastermind behind CBS's effort to not just revive Star Trek, but also transform it into a vast narrative universe in the Marvel mold. This is Alex Kurtzman. It's failing. Everything he does is filled with innate integrity. He fights for the things he believes in, and he's very willing to collaborate once you're on the same wavelength. Basically, do you sit in his echo chamber? You do? Perfect. He will talk to you then. He will be all about it. Absolutely all about it. Now, continues, lo-fi and little quaint by today's standards, The Next Generation was the most successful of any Star Trek television series. That's hilarious, isn't it? Because you've just talked about it, saying for seven seasons, string of 4 feature films. Oh, it's little quaint, you know, lo-fi by today's standards. But it was the most successful television series, so why are you changing the format, for God's sake? Now, the original starring William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy was poorly rated and cancelled by NBC after 3 seasons. The show raked in Emmy nominations and minted money for Paramount Television and grew a massive following attached to the unlikely figure of Stuart's Picard, a Frenchman with a posh English accent. Now it continues, The Next Generation presented a humanist future in which issues like poverty, race and class have long been sorted out, and conflicts are more often resolved through negotiation and problem solving than at the point of a phaser pistol. Stewart had no desire to go there again. Basically, that utopia that we had essentially envisaged in The Next Generation, that show that you really, really liked, we're going to take all of that back now. We don't want to go there, right? We don't want to go there. What we want to do is take commentary on where we're at right now and paint everything as dour, terrible, bad, awful. That's the world. Lovely. I think what we're trying to say is important, he says. The world of The Next Generation doesn't exist anymore. It's different. Nothing is really safe. Nothing is really secure. Awful. Science fiction, a genre Stewart had little use for before he became one of its major figures. That's wrong. He was in Dune. I think that was somewhat just before The Next Generation, if I remember rightly, or around the same time. It's difficult to say with Patrick Stewart because he looks the same. He is the ageless man. No, I was right. I've just Googled it. They're wrong. He was in Dune, massive sci-fi property. God's sake. I knew I was right. He is the ageless man, but I knew I was right there. So anyway, it continues, right? Obviously, you know, science fiction has long been a way to address the anxieties of the non-fictional present. That Stewart would want to use it thusly at a time when the compassion of the US and Britain for the world's neediest is at an dear should be expected, given who he is. And again, it talks about how his background is and things like this, right? Now, the interesting stuff as it moves on is all to do with the show's motivations. Now, there is an interesting topic about Gene Roddenberry, the creator. Stewart's path to the captain's chair of the USS Enterprise contained one towering obstacle. However, Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry was famously resistant to Stewart's casting. The British actor was, to his mind, too old and too bold to succeed Shatner's swaggering James T. Kirk. Stewart claims that Roddenberry circulated a memo at Paramount saying, "I do not want to hear Patrick Stewart's name mentioned ever again in connection with The Next Generation." That might be true. We only have one person to go by though, don't we, really? So it's a bit of an interesting story now to kind of come out. Now it says, but Roddenberry acquiesced to Stewart's advocates, producers Robert Justman and Rick Berman. Roddenberry died in 1991 while The Next Generation was still on the air. God, I wish he had not died when he did. I have a lot of respect for Gene, and I have to say also gratitude. I know more than once I caught him sitting in his director's chair looking at me, and I knew he was thinking, how the F did we end up with this guy? I don't know whether that's speaking ill of the dead or not. It's distasteful, at the very least, I guess. Now, again, The Next Generation turned Star Trek from a single story about Shatner's Kirk and Nimoy's Spock into a franchise. In addition to the 4 features, it spawned 2 spin-offs, Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Voyager. So this is what they're looking to recreate, right? This is what they want. Now, Stewart describes himself as very proud of the Next Generation, and like other members of the cast, regrets that Paramount ended the show when it did, in a drive to take the Enterprise crew into theatres, but he found himself typecast afterward. He recalls meeting with an unnamed major filmmaker who told him bluntly, "Why would I want Captain Picard in my movie?" Which, yeah, kind of makes sense. It's a shame. He's a great actor. Now, the interesting stuff is all about the X-Men franchise, right? Because he talks about Logan, and he talks about it being his, like, that's the reason why he wanted to return to being Picard again. Also, side note, Green Room is great. If you haven't seen Green Room, go and watch it. Like, it's genuinely really, 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 really good. Now, Hugh and I were so thrilled when the last thing we did for X-Men was Logan. It was the best X-Men experience we both had because we were the same characters, but their world had been blown apart. Now, this is important because this goes hand in hand with essentially what they're looking to do with Star Trek Picard. So yeah, so the Next Generation didn't end like that. In fact, our last movie, Nemesis, was pretty weak. That one had Tom Hardy in it as a Picard clone. Very strange. Released in 2002, Nemesis lost money for Paramount, blah, blah, blah. And then we start to talk about Kurtzman again, right? Star Trek Discovery. A prequel to the original series would become the cornerstone of streaming service. No one likes it. Stewart had resisted past overtures for Star Trek Curious Producers when he met in his kitchen with Kurtzman and writers Michael Chabon and Akiva Goldsman in 2017. He did so as a courtesy. I explained to them all those elements of Next Generation which belong in Next Generation and why I didn't want to go near them again. But they talked about it in such an interesting way, and they talked for a long time. Stewart told the producers no thank you and sent them on their way. Then he had an immediate change of heart. He told his agent to ask Kurtzman to put his ideas in writing. 48 hours later, Kurtzman sent over a more than 30-page packet outlining a possible Picard series. So, yeah. Now we start to look at the world as it's going to be in the series, which is where, again, I start to say it's probably going to be trash. Picard finds its hero living in a near isolation on a very uncosmic French vineyard. He is retired and estranged from Starfleet, the interstellar navy to which he devoted most of his life. He's haunted by a pair of catastrophes, one personal, the other societal. The death of his android colleague, Data, as in Nemesis, and a refugee crisis spawned by the destruction of the planet Romulus, as seen in Abrams' Star Trek. So it's a continuation of that, basically. When those two seemingly desperate strands of his life cross, Picard returns to action, this time without the backing of a Starfleet whose moral centre has shifted. But wasn't that the entire backbone of Next Generation, Starfleet? Roddenberry believed that in the future, human beings would advance to the point that they would, essentially, not have conflict with one another. The biggest challenges would be external. Stewart, also an executive producer on Picard, insists we are reimagining, very faithful to Gene Roddenberry's notion of what the future might be like, but rigid adherence to that notion is clearly not what he's here for. Okay. In a way, the world of Next Generation had been too perfect and too protected. Okay. That's why it ran for 7 seasons and was very popular, was it? It was the Enterprise. It was a safe world of respect and communication and care, and sometimes fun. In Picard, the Federation, a union of planets. Check this wording out. The Federation, a union of planets, bonded by shared democratic values, has taken an isolationist turn. Planets. Aliens, cosmic distance between them, are now isolationist. The new show, Stewart says, was me responding to the world of Brexit and Trump and feeling, why hasn't the Federation changed? Why hasn't Starfleet changed? Maybe they're not as reliable and trustworthy as we all thought. Oh my god. Real-world parallels are not hard to identify. It is 1 week before the parliamentary election that will see British Prime Minister and Brexit hardliner Boris Johnson's Conservatives win a staggering victory over their Labour rivals. And Stewart is not feeling optimistic about the near future. Oh my god. And then he literally just starts to complain about England. I'm not sure which one of us is in the most trouble, he says, of Britain and the United States. I think it's actually the UK. I think we're effed up. I think we're completely effed. He points to studies predicting decades-long economic damage inflicted by the country's looming withdrawal from the European Union. Of the US, he says, there is a time limit to your effed state, which is 4 years away. He expresses hope the United States that has given us the Trump administration can change, but adds he will likely get re-elected. I really don't think putting so much politics in this is going to be working. And I get it, like universal politics, as seen in The Next Generation, fine, but not current events politics. Like, you've got real problems with it aging then. And again, like, anyone who thinks anything of like any political leaning should be able to see that. I think this is absolutely screwed. Yeah, I don't think this is going to end very well.